The room fell silent as the tall, blue-skinned alien commander entered. His 4 eyes scanned the human delegation with what seemed like disgust. Dr. Samantha Miller stood beside Captain Eric Jones, trying to maintain a professional appearance despite her racing heart. This was humanity's first official meeting with the Vrax Imperium after decades of them watching Earth from afar. "We welcome you aboard the U.S. Defender," Captain Jones said with a slight bow. "We hope this meeting marks the beginning of peaceful relations between our peoples." The alien commander, Supreme General Scathar, made a clicking sound that the translation device interpreted as laughter. "Peace is only valuable between equals, human. We are here to determine if you are worthy of that status." Samantha studied the aliens carefully. As both a combat medic and xenobiologist, she had been selected specifically for this mission. Her eyes noted the reinforced bone structure around their vital organs and the tense way they held their secondary limbs, ready for combat at any moment. "Perhaps we could begin by sharing information about our cultures," Samantha suggested. "I would be interested to learn about your medical practices." Scathar turned his upper eyes toward her. "You are a healer." "Yes, I'm a doctor," she explained. "I specialize in emergency medicine and xenobiology, the study of alien life forms." The general's translator produced more clicking sounds as he spoke to his subordinates. They seemed amused by something. "You waste resources on healing the weak?" Scathar finally asked. "In the Imperium, those who require medical attention beyond basic repair have proven themselves unfit. They are removed from service." Captain Jones frowned. "On Earth, we believe all lives have value. Our medical personnel are dedicated to preserving life whenever possible." Samantha added, "We've found that investing in medical care actually makes our society stronger. People can recover and continue to contribute." Before Scathar could respond, one of his officers suddenly collapsed, body shaking violently. The other Vrax stepped away, turning their backs on their fallen comrade. "What's happening?" Captain Jones demanded. "He is defective," Scathar stated simply. "His neural pathways are failing. He will be replaced." Without thinking, Samantha rushed forward, kneeling beside the convulsing alien. "He's having a seizure. I might be able to help." "Dr. Miller," Captain Jones called out, "we shouldn't interfere with their customs." But Samantha was already checking the alien's vital signs, relying on her limited knowledge of Vrax physiology. She reached for her medical bag and pulled out a neural stabilizer. "His brain activity is similar enough to ours that this might work," she muttered, pressing the device against the side of the alien's head. The Vrax officers watched with what seemed like shock as Samantha worked. After a tense minute, the seizure stopped. The alien officer's breathing steadied. "He needs proper medical attention, but he should recover," Samantha said, looking up at Scathar. The general's 4 eyes narrowed dangerously. "You have interfered with natural selection. This one proved weak and should have been culled." Captain Jones stepped forward. "Dr. Miller was following our highest principles." "Then your principles make you unfit to exist independently," Scathar declared. "A species that wastes resources on the weak will never survive the harshness of the galaxy. For your own good, humans must be brought under proper guidance." The saved officer was dragged away by 2 others as Scathar turned to leave. "This meeting is concluded. You will receive terms of surrender within your day cycle." "We came here for peace," Captain Jones protested. "And you shall have it, after you submit to the Imperium." Scathar paused at the doorway. "Your healers have doomed you by preserving weakness in your gene pool. We will correct this error." As the aliens departed, alarms blared throughout the ship. "They're charging weapons," shouted the tactical officer. Captain Jones rushed to the command chair. "Battle stations. Dr. Miller, get to medical bay." As Samantha ran through the corridors, the ship shuddered under the first impact. She realized with horror that her attempt to save one life might have started a war. Humanity's first contact had failed, all because she'd done what any doctor would do: try to save a life. 6 months had passed since the first attack. Lieutenant Alan Pierce crouched behind a fallen concrete pillar on the Mars colony, watching Vrac soldiers patrol the streets. Once a nurse at Boston General Hospital, Alan now led a resistance cell against the alien invaders. "They're moving away from the supply depot," he whispered into his comm unit. "Team 2, you have 3 minutes to get those meds." On the other side of the settlement, Ryan Hudson and Kelly Davidson slipped past the patrol. Their mission was simple but vital: steal medical supplies that the Vracs had stockpiled but refused to use on injured humans. "I don't get these aliens," Ryan said as they cut through the depot's thin metal wall. "They have all this medicine but only use it on their commanders." Kelly nodded, quickly filling her backpack with antibiotics and pain relievers. "That's why they're losing this war. They let their wounded die while we save ours." The comm unit crackled. "Hurry up," Alan warned. Their patrol pattern changed. "You have 1 minute." Back at his position, Alan watched through binoculars as a Vrax officer examined something on the ground. The alien picked up a bloody bandage that one of the human refugees must have dropped. The officer made that clicking sound that humans had learned meant anger or disgust. "These humans waste resources keeping the weak alive," the officer said to his subordinate, the translation coming through Alan's special earpiece. "It makes no sense." The subordinate responded, "Yet their injured return to battle. Our warriors who require medical aid are replaced. Their numbers do not decrease as quickly as ours." The officer struck his subordinate with a secondary limb. "Do not speak such things. The Supreme General will hear of this weakness in your thinking." Alan smiled grimly. The Vracs still didn't understand what they were fighting against. Back at the resistance base, hidden in an abandoned mining tunnel, Dr. Samantha Miller treated wounded colonists and soldiers. Her makeshift hospital had saved hundreds of lives since the invasion began. Today, she was examining the first captured Vrac soldier they had managed to take alive. "His vital signs are stabilizing," she told Captain Eric Jones, who had survived the initial attack on the U.S. Defender. "Their physiology is fascinating. They actually have redundant neural pathways that can be rerouted when damaged." The captain frowned. "You're saving him? After what they've done?" Samantha looked up from her patient. "I'm a doctor first, Captain. Besides, every Vrax we heal is a source of information. The Vrax wouldn't do the same for us," he reminded her. "That's why we're better than them," she replied simply, adjusting the alien's medication. On the other side of the solar system, aboard the Vrax command ship, Supreme General Skthar reviewed battle reports with growing frustration. "How is it possible?" he demanded of his war council. "Their casualties should have broken their resistance months ago." A Vrax intelligence officer stepped forward. "Supreme General, we have discovered something disturbing. The humans not only treat their wounded, but their medical personnel are also trained warriors." Skathar's 4 eyes blinked in disbelief. "Explain." "Their doctors and nurses learn to heal and to kill. When their medical facilities are attacked, the healers defend them with unexpected skill. They save their injured, who then return to fight again." The general slammed his primary limb against the table. "This defies logic. Why waste training on those whose purpose is preservation, not destruction?" Another officer played a captured transmission showing human combat medics in action. First, they were treating wounded soldiers. Then, when attacked, the same medics picked up weapons and fought with precision before returning to their medical duties. Skar watched in silence. Then he spoke quietly. "They have merged what should be separate. Their strength flows from what we perceived as weakness." He turned to his council. "We must adapt. From now on, all human medical personnel are primary targets. Their healers must be eliminated first." Back on Mars, Alan Pierce received the latest intelligence from Earth Command. He gathered his team to share the news. "The Vracs are changing their strategy," he announced. "They're specifically targeting medical personnel and facilities now." Ryan looked worried. "They've finally figured it out." Alan nodded. "Yes, they've realized that even our healers can kill." Dr. Samantha Miller stared at the microscope screen, her face lit by its blue glow. What she saw there could change the course of the war, but at what cost? She had been studying Vrax biology for months now. Their blood samples revealed a unique weakness in their immune system. "You've been in this lab for 20 hours straight," said Admiral William Carter as he entered. The Admiral had taken command of Earth's defenses after several military leaders died in the initial attacks. "I found something," Samantha said without looking up. "The Vrax have a special protein in their blood that regulates their neural pathways. If we created a compound that targets this protein, we could incapacitate their entire force." Admiral Carter moved closer. "You mean a bioweapon? One that could end this war?" "Yes," Samantha said, finally looking up. Her eyes showed her inner conflict. "But it would violate everything I believe as a doctor. We would be using medicine to harm, not heal." "How many people have died in the last 6 months, Doctor?" Carter asked quietly. "How many more will die if the war continues?" Samantha had no answer. She knew the numbers. Millions dead. Earth's major cities in ruins. The Mars colony barely holding on. "Give me time to find a non-lethal approach," she finally said. "Something that disables without killing. I took an oath to do no harm." The Admiral nodded slowly. "You have 1 week, Doctor. After that, we need a solution, whatever it may be." After he left, Samantha put her head in her hands. The line between healer and soldier had never been so thin. On Mars, Lieutenant Alan Pierce and his team were planning their next mission when Kelly Davidson rushed in with news. "We just rescued 3 doctors from a Vrax research facility," she said, out of breath. "They say the aliens were studying them, trying to understand human medical techniques." Alan followed her to their medical area, where 3 exhausted men and women sat drinking water. One of them, Dr. Frank Rivera, looked up as Alan approached. "Lieutenant, they're preparing something big," Frank said. "The Vrax were dissecting human brain tissue, testing different compounds on it." "Why would they be interested in our brains?" Alan asked. "They're developing a weapon that targets human brain function," another doctor explained. "Something that shuts down our higher thinking, but leaves basic functions intact. They want slaves, not corpses." Alan's blood ran cold. He needed to warn Earth Command immediately. Back in her lab, Samantha worked without sleep to develop her non-lethal alternative. If she could create something that temporarily disrupted Vrax neural pathways without permanent damage, they might force a surrender without genocide. Her comm unit buzzed with an encrypted message from Mars. As she read Alan's warning about the Vrax brain weapon, her resolve strengthened. They needed her solution now more than ever. In another part of the medical center, Nurse Kelly Davidson had been reassigned from Mars to help with the growing number of wounded soldiers and Vrax prisoners. She checked the vitals of a young Vrax officer who watched her with confusion in all 4 eyes. "Why do you treat me?" he asked in broken English. "I would kill you if I could." "Because that's what we do," Kelly answered simply. "We heal, even our enemies." "Waste of resources," the Vrax muttered. Kelly smiled. "Is it? You're learning about us while I treat you, and I'm learning about you. Knowledge is never wasted." The alien fell silent, considering her words. Aboard his command ship, General Skthar reviewed intercepted communications about Dr. Miller's research. "Their chief medical officer is developing a weapon against us," he asked his intelligence officer. "Yes, Supreme General, based on their medical knowledge of our biology." Skthar paced the command deck. "This confirms what we suspected. Their healers are their most dangerous weapons. They understand life, so they know best how to attack it." He stopped and stared at the holographic map of the solar system. "We have underestimated these humans from the beginning. Their compassion is not weakness, it is a different kind of strength." "What are your orders, Supreme General?" his officer asked. Skathar's voice was cold. "Capture their Dr. Miller at any cost. Kill all other medical personnel on site. If we cannot understand their power, we must destroy it." Admiral Carter looked over the small team assembled before him. 5 people who might change the course of the war. Lieutenant Alan Pierce stood at attention beside combat medic Ryan Hudson. They had been brought back from Mars specifically for this mission. Operation Hippocrates is a go, the Admiral announced. Dr. Miller has developed a non-lethal bioagent that will temporarily disable Vrak's neural functions without permanent damage. Samantha stepped forward, holding a metal container. This needs to be released into the air circulation system of the Vrak's command ship. It will render them unconscious for approximately 6 hours. Enough time to secure the ship and force a ceasefire. Alan studied the container. How do we get aboard their flagship? It's the most heavily guarded ship in their fleet. We've modified a captured Vrak shuttle, Carter explained. And we have this. He held up a small device. It mimics the biological signature of a high-ranking Vrak's officer. It should get you through their initial security scans. Ryan looked nervous. And if it doesn't? Samantha gave him a small smile. Then you'll need to rely on your other skills, Medic Hudson. 2 days later, Alan piloted the stolen shuttle toward the massive Vrak's flagship. His team wore stolen Vrak's armor, modified to fit human bodies. Dr. Miller monitored the mission from Earth via a secure comlink. Remember, her voice came through their earpieces. Vraks have poor vision in the blue light spectrum. If you need to hide, find areas with blue lighting. The shuttle approached the flagship's docking bay. A harsh voice demanded identification. Shuttle TC-17 returning with captured human medical supplies, Alan replied, using the Vrak's translation device. There was a pause. Alan's hand moved toward his weapon. Proceed to docking bay 3. The voice finally responded. The team exchanged relieved glances. Step 1 complete. Once aboard, they moved through the ship's corridors, following the path to the central air system that Dr. Miller had determined from studying Vrak's ship designs. 2 guards ahead, Ryan whispered, peering around a corner. Alan activated the device that masked their human scent. Walk with purpose. Act like you belong. They strode past the guards, who barely glanced at them. Vrak's society was built on strict hierarchy. Lower ranks never questioned those who appeared to be superiors. We're approaching the central air processing unit, Alan told Samantha through the comlink. Any last instructions? The container needs to be placed directly in the intake chamber, she replied. Once activated, you'll have 3 minutes to get back to the shuttle before the agent disperses. As they reached the massive chamber with its humming machinery, Alan noticed something unexpected. Through a viewing window, he saw a large room filled with small Vraks. They moved differently than adult Vraks, their movements less coordinated. Dr. Miller, he whispered urgently. There are Vraks young on this ship. They appear to be in some kind of training facility right next to the air system. There was silence on the comm. Then Samantha's voice, tense with concern. The bioagent might affect their developing neural systems differently. We didn't test it on Vrak's juveniles. What do we do? Ryan asked. Abort. Ellen looked at the young Vraks. Even as children, they were being trained for war. But they were still children. Dr. Miller, can we modify the agent to reduce its effect? He asked. Yes, but I'll need to guide you through recalibrating the dispersal rate, she replied. It will take precise adjustments. As Ryan stood guard, Alan carefully opened the container. Following Samantha's instructions, he adjusted the internal mechanisms. Suddenly, an alarm blared through the ship. Unknown biological signatures detected in Sector 7, announced a harsh voice over the intercom. Their masking device had failed. We've been made, Ryan said, raising his weapon. We need to hurry. Alan worked faster, hands steady despite the danger. This was no different than performing emergency surgery under fire, something every combat medic was trained for. Done, he announced, placing the modified container in the intake chamber. He activated it with a press of a button. 3 minutes to get out of here. As they turned to leave, a blast hit Ryan in the shoulder, spinning him around. A squad of Vrak soldiers had found them. Alan fired back while dragging Ryan behind a console. The wound was bad, bleeding heavily. "Go," Ryan gasped. "Complete the mission. No one gets left behind." Alan replied, quickly applying a pressure bandage. He administered a stimulant from his med kit, then helped Ryan to his feet. That's Rule 1 of combat medicine. General Scathar woke with a pounding in all 4 of his brains. His vision blurred as he tried to focus on the ceiling of his quarters. What had happened? The last thing he remembered was an alert about human biological signatures on the ship. Then nothing. He sat up slowly, feeling weakness in his limbs. Around him, the ship was unusually quiet. His communication device buzzed with urgent messages from throughout the fleet. The humans had somehow incapacitated his entire command ship for 6 hours. Supreme General, his second-in-command, entered the room. "We are receiving a transmission from the humans. They wish to discuss terms." Scathar snarled. "No terms. They attacked us with biological weapons." "Sir," the officer said hesitantly, "our medical analysis shows the agent causes no permanent damage. They could have killed us all, but they chose not to." This gave Scathar pause. In Vrak's military doctrine, you always delivered the killing blow when an enemy was vulnerable. To do otherwise was to show weakness. Yet these humans had deliberately used a non-lethal weapon. "Bring me all information we have on human medical practices," he ordered. "I must understand their thinking if we are to defeat them." In his private quarters, Scathar studied the reports. Humans had a concept called the Hippocratic Oath that their healers took. It contained a strange promise to do no harm. Yet these same healers developed weapons based on their medical knowledge. More confusing still were reports from the field. Human medics would risk their lives to save even one wounded soldier. They would treat injured Vraks with the same care they showed their own kind. It made no sense. In Vrak society, resources were never wasted on the weak. Only the strongest survived to serve the Imperium. "Supreme General," a young Vrak scientist entered after being summoned. "You asked for my assessment of human medical technology." "Yes. Tell me why they waste resources healing the weak." The scientist shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, I have been studying this question. It appears their approach actually conserves resources. A wounded human, once healed, returns to fight again. We lose warriors permanently when they are injured." Scathar narrowed his eyes. "You sound like you admire them." The scientist looked down. I have been treated by them." "Sir." "What?" Scathar stood, his secondary limbs extended in threat display. "During the battle on their Mars colony, I was captured with a chronic neural condition. A human nurse named Kelly Davidson treated me instead of executing me. I learned much during my captivity about their medical ethics." Scathar should have ordered the scientist's immediate execution for such weakness. Instead, he found himself curious. "And what did you learn?" "They believe healing makes them stronger as a species, not weaker. Their compassion is a form of strength we do not possess." The scientist hesitated, then continued. "They can choose when to kill and when to heal. We have only been taught to kill." Scathar dismissed the scientist and returned to studying the reports from previous battles. A new picture was forming in his mind. The humans' integrated approach to medicine and warfare created a resilience that his forces couldn't match through pure military might. Their soldiers fought harder knowing they would be treated if wounded. Their medical personnel were both healers and fighters, switching roles as needed. He reviewed footage from the Battle of Europa, where human medics had established a field hospital under heavy fire. When Vrak's forces breached their perimeter, the medics had picked up weapons and fought with surprising skill. Once the attack was repelled, they immediately returned to treating the wounded, including injured Vrak's prisoners. The general's communication device buzzed again. His officers were waiting for orders. Should they launch another attack? Should they respond to the humans' request for talks? For the first time in his long military career, Scathar felt uncertain. The humans had shown they could have wiped out his command structure permanently but chose not to. Their strange blend of compassion and combat prowess defied Vrak's understanding. The red dust of Mars swirled as Earth shuttles landed on its surface. Operation Homecoming had begun, the mission to retake the Mars colony from Vrak's control. Dr. Samantha Miller stepped off the lead shuttle, medical gear strapped to her back and a sidearm at her hip. Her new medical combat unit followed behind her. "Set up the field hospital here," she ordered, pointing to a flat area protected by rock formations on 3 sides. "Defense team, establish a perimeter. Remember, this is both a treatment center and a fortress." Admiral Carter's strategy was bold. Instead of hiding medical facilities behind the front lines, they would place them right in the battle zone, heavily defended but accessible to both sides. It was a statement of human values as much as a military tactic. As her team worked, Samantha received an update from Lieutenant Alan Pierce, who had been operating behind enemy lines for weeks. "The Vraks are expecting us." His voice crackled over the secure channel. "But something strange is happening. General Scathar ordered his troops not to target medical personnel directly. It contradicts his previous orders." Samantha frowned. "That doesn't make sense. He's been trying to eliminate our medics since he realized their value." "I know," Alan replied. "My sources inside their command say he's been studying human medical ethics. He even released some human prisoners who needed medical treatment." Before Samantha could respond, the ground shook with the impact of Vrak's artillery. The battle for Mars had begun. For 3 days, Earth forces pushed forward while Vrak's troops fought to maintain control. Samantha's field hospital filled with wounded from both sides as the battle lines shifted around them. Her medics worked without rest, saving every life they could. On the 4th day, Samantha was performing surgery on a human soldier when a massive explosion rocked the facility. Dust fell from the ceiling as she maintained her focus on the open chest cavity before her. "Status report," she called out, not looking up from her work. "Vrak's forces have broken through the eastern perimeter," a voice responded over the comm. "They're heading straight for us." Samantha completed the final suture before stepping back from the table. "Move all critical patients to the inner chambers," she ordered. "Combat medics to defensive positions." She picked up her rifle and moved to the entrance. Outside, she could see Vrak's troops advancing toward the hospital, but something was odd about their formation. They weren't firing at the building. Through her binoculars, Samantha spotted General Skar himself leading the Vrak's forces. He carried no weapon and was flanked by officers who seemed to be protesting his actions. "Hold fire," Samantha ordered her defense team. "Something's happening." Scathar approached to within 50 meters of the hospital and then stopped. Using a human translation device, his voice boomed across the battlefield. "Dr. Samantha Miller, I wish to observe your medical facility in operation." Samantha stepped forward, rifle lowered but ready. "Why would I allow that, General?" "Because I have brought my wounded," Scathar replied, gesturing behind him where Vrak's soldiers carried injured comrades. "And I wish to understand why you choose to heal when you could kill." It was a trap. It had to be. Yet Samantha saw genuine confusion in the general's 4 eyes. "You may enter with 2 guards," she decided. "The rest of your forces must remain outside our perimeter. Any aggressive move, and this conversation ends." Scathar agreed. As the Vrak's wounded were brought in, human medics began treating them alongside their own people. The general watched in silence as Samantha moved from patient to patient, giving orders, performing procedures, switching effortlessly between human and Vrak's anatomy. When a fresh wave of casualties arrived from a nearby skirmish, Samantha found herself operating on a high-ranking Vrak's officer while Scathar observed. "His tertiary brainstem is damaged," she explained as she worked. "In a human, this would be fatal. But your species has remarkable redundancy in your neural system." "Why do you tell me this?" Scar asked. "Such knowledge could be used against us." Samantha's hands never stopped moving as she repaired delicate neural tissue. "Because healing and teaching go hand in hand. We don't keep medical knowledge secret, even from enemies." "Knowledge itself isn't good or evil," she replied. "It's how you use it that matters." As she finished the procedure, alarms blared throughout the facility. A section of the perimeter had been breached, not by Scathar's forces, but by a splinter faction of Vrax who opposed any contact with humans. "We're under attack," Ryan shouted through the comm system. "They've broken through the west entrance." Samantha immediately locked down the operating room. "Stay here," she told Scathar. "This area is secure." 1 month after the Battle of Mars, representatives from Earth and the Vrax Imperium gathered on a neutral space station. The room was tense as Admiral William Carter and Dr. Samantha Miller waited for the Vrax delegation. Lieutenant Alan Pierce stood guard by the door, his hand never far from his weapon. "Do you think this will work?" Samantha asked quietly. Carter shrugged. "General Scathar requested this meeting himself. After what happened on Mars, something changed in him." The doors slid open, and Scathar entered with 3 officers. The tall blue alien still moved with military precision, but the hatred was gone from his 4 eyes. "Admiral Carter." "Dr. Miller." Scathar nodded in greeting. "I appreciate your willingness to meet." They sat around a large table, humans on one side, Vrax on the other. The space between them seemed to represent the gulf in their understanding. "I have observed your medical practices," Scathar began. "I have seen your healers save lives and take them when necessary. This contradicts everything in Vrax culture, where roles are strictly defined." Samantha leaned forward. "General, in human history, many of our healers were also warriors. Our first doctors often fought alongside those they treated." "But your Hippocratic oath," Scathar said, surprising everyone with his knowledge. "It says, 'Do no harm.' Yet you developed weapons based on your medical knowledge." "The oath guides us to preserve life when possible," Samantha explained. "Sometimes fighting is necessary to protect more lives. The choice of when to heal and when to fight is what makes us human." Scathar was silent for a moment, processing her words. "During the battle on Mars, you positioned yourself between me and danger, even though I was your enemy." "You weren't my enemy in that moment," Samantha said. "You were in a medical facility under my protection." The general turned to his officers. "The humans have shown us something our society has forgotten. Strength comes in many forms, not just the ability to destroy." As Scathar began outlining a proposed peace agreement, alarms suddenly blared throughout the station. Security screens showed a Vrax battle cruiser approaching, one not under Scathar's command. "Radical faction," one of Scathar's officers reported. "They oppose any peace with humans." The station rocked as the first shots hit its shields. Alan moved quickly to secure the room, while Admiral Carter called for emergency evacuation. "We need to get to the shuttles," Carter urged. But Scathar shook his head. "They will target your ships first. The human delegation must take our Vrax shuttle. They won't fire on their own kind." Another blast hit the station, stronger this time. Part of the ceiling collapsed, sending metal beams crashing down. Scathar pushed Samantha aside as a beam fell, taking the impact himself. Blue blood pooled around him as he lay pinned beneath the metal. Without hesitation, Samantha knelt beside him, medical kit already in hand. "I need to stop this bleeding before we move him," she told Alan, who was trying to lift the beam. "Doctor, we don't have time," Carter warned, looking at the security screen showing the attacking ship moving closer. "We don't leave anyone behind," Samantha replied firmly, working to stabilize Scathar's condition. Despite the pain, Scathar watched her with all 4 eyes. "You risk your life to save mine, even now." "That's what healers do," she said simply. With Alan's help, they freed Scathar and supported him to the Vrax shuttle. As they prepared for launch, the general turned to his second-in-command. "Tell our people what you have seen here today," he ordered. "Tell them that strength without compassion is merely brutality." The shuttle escaped as the radical faction continued firing on the station. Samantha worked to treat Scathar's wounds, but they were severe. His breathing became labored. "General, stay with me," she urged, administering medication. "We'll reach medical facilities soon." "Too late for me," Scathar said weakly, but not too late for peace. He grasped Samantha's arm with his primary limb. I understand now. Your way is better. He turned to his officers with his final strength. See how she fights to save me, even knowing who I am and what I've done. Even their healers kill, but they choose when not to. Therein lies wisdom we do not possess. As the shuttle docked with the Earth flagship, Scathar's grip loosened. His final words were spoken in a tone of revelation rather than defeat. Even their healers kill. 3 months later, Samantha stood before a mixed class of human and Vrax medical students. The peace treaty had included a controversial provision requiring the Vrax to accept human medical training and assistance. Medicine is about choices, she told them. The power to heal comes with the knowledge that could harm. Our oath guides us to choose healing whenever possible.